Hi, I am Sanya Brito and this is a news review. Today we will do the papers, and later on the show I'll be joined by the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Finance, Honorable Boa Saidi, to talk about the much talked about COVID-19 funds and the questions surrounding them. But first, let's begin with the newspapers today. We have the Standard newspaper, and let's take a look at some of the headlines from the Standard. GPPPA Director Tambaidu has been removed. Fabakary Tombong Jatta refutes Finance Minister's unratified loan claims, and Chebo Cham reconciles with Marabous. Jahankas issues stern warning against insulting a tribe, and the TRRC to start monetary reparations soon. Let's take a look at some of these stories in detail. The Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commissions to start monetary reparations soon, says Babagalle Jallow. Babagalle Jallow, the Executive Secretary of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, has said the commission will soon start giving out monetary reparations. He was quoted as saying monetary reparations will be rolled out as soon as the TRRC reparations rules and regulations are finalized and gazetted by the government. The process is in the final stages of a formulation at the commission level, which has already adopted a reparations policy, he told the Standard newspaper. The Truth Commission is mandated to investigate human rights violations by former President Yahya Jammeh from 1994 to 2017. The commission is also mandated to give reparations to deserving victims. Fabakary Tombong Jatta refutes Finance Minister's unratified loan claims. The leader of the Opposition Alliance for Patriotic Reorientation and Construction has refuted Finance Minister's claims that even the former government used to take some loans without seeking ratification from National Assembly. Jatta was quoted as saying the Gambia government under the APRC has never taken any loan without subjecting it to Parliament scrutiny. He said he challenged Mamburen Jai to prove his claims. Tombong Jatta was quoted as saying, I was the majority leader of the National Assembly, and I swear to God you cannot get a loan from any country or institution without parliamentary ratification. If not, he added, that loan only becomes a loan between that president and the institution. Chebo Cham reconciles with Marabous. Chebo Cham, a famous Islamic preacher who recently landed in trouble with a section of Marabous who accused him of insulting them on his radio shows, has reconciled with his victims. The reconciliation came on Sunday, presided over by West Coast Region Deputy Governor Musa Suso at his residence in Sukuta. Attended by a large group of followers, the Marabou Chebo Cham said that he is apologizing and that his remarks were offensive and that it was a slip of the tongue. Maifati warns politicians against vilifying military. The leader of the Gambia Moral Congress has warned his fellow politicians against vilifying the military. Maifati was quoted as saying, national security knows no partisan colors. It is a national project and a national enterprise, and everyone is a subscriber and a stakeholder, and therefore it must not be politicized. As a former security minister, he was quoted as saying, it bothers him when politicians vilify the armed and security forces for political gain. Fati's comments came after a row between Gambia Action Party's presidential candidate General Lamin Bojang and the Gambia Armed Forces over comments Mr. Bojang made about the army. Finance Permanent Secretary says COVID-19 funds expenditures are transparent. He will be our guest here later today to shed light on that. The Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, Boa Saidi, has described as transparent, honest and accountable the efforts of his ministry in the resource mobilization and distribution of the national COVID-19 relief packages. P.S. Saidi, a leading economist in the country, made the remarks during a lengthy discussion on the Good Morning Gambia breakfast show on GRTS, where he discussed the government's COVID-19 emergency fund as well as the emergency food support initiative. He was quoted as saying the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund is totally independent of the budgetary allocations of the Ministry of Health. The funds are in a separate project account and it is managed by an independent committee co-chaired by the permanent secretaries of the Ministry of Health and Finance. It is also comprised of different stakeholders such as the Accountant General, Director General Gambia Public Procurement Authority, Director General Internal Audit Office, and the Director of Health, PS said, indicating that the intergovernmental body was established to ensure accountability while enabling the state to respond to the pandemic quickly with limited bureaucratic red tape. And of course, the final story on the Standard newspaper, medical items worth over 1.2 million Gambian dollars is donated to the Ministry of Health. Paradise Foundation recently donated medical items worth over $1.2 million to Ministry of Health at a presentation held at the Paradise Suites Hotel. The medical items donated include respiratory masks and mobility equipment. Speaking on behalf of the foundation, Binta Job said the mission of Paradise Foundation is to champion and enhance quality of life of individuals in the Gambia through access to employment, healthcare, and social protection. Indian community donate to needy families in the Gambia. The Indian community in the Gambia on Sunday presented over 250 bags of rice to needy families to help them stay at home as a measure to contain the spread of COVID-19. The Sunday presentation is the second of its kind since the outbreak of the coronavirus in the Gambia, with the first being a presentation of 200 bags of rice and sugar, spaghetti, cooking oil, milk, and other items. That's it for the Standard newspaper. Let's take a look at what the Point has. Woman dies in motorbike accident. Former GRTS UN radio anchor dies with COVID-19. And Governor Sane calls for more awareness to stem spread of COVID-19. Let's take a look at Governor Sane's story. Governor Sane calls for more awareness in the fight against the spread of the novel coronavirus. West Coast Region Governor Lamin Sane has underscored the significance of creating more community and border awareness on the prevention of COVID-19. Addressing members of the Regional COVID-19 Task Force Committee at his office in Brikama, Mr. Sane said sensitization involving healthcare providers and Red Cross volunteers is important to dispel misconceptions on COVID-19 and control its spread. That's it for the newspapers. We will take a break, and when we are back, we will sit down with the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Boasedi. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now, like I said earlier, we are joined today by a special guest from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, the Permanent Secretary himself, Mr. Boasedi, who will be speaking to us on the much talked about COVID-19 funds and, of course, the questions surrounding the funds. Welcome to the Fatu Network News Review, Mr. Saidi.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. And there's been so much talk and, of course, questions surrounding the COVID-19 funds. Well, let's break it down so that we are all on the same page, because there is so much confusion surrounding this. March 29, a $500 million emergency fund was approved by the head of state in response to the emergency or to the crisis. And of course, on April 7, Finance Minister Mamboure Njie appeared before Parliament, where he told lawmakers that the funds were in fact available and ready for disbursement. And as some people might say, a week after that or 2 weeks after that, April 17, then boom, he said that 143 million out of the $500 million has already been spent. This message does not sit well with a lot of Gambians. Can you please explain what is going on here, because there is so much confusion?
Okay, thank you. The 500 million, in fact, the resources that the Ministry of Finance and the Gambia, I would say the Gambia government, devoted to fighting this pandemic is $512 million. What people, what's stuck in the minds of the public is the $500 million, because that was what was announced by His Excellency the President, Mr. Adama Barrow. But before the 500 million was announced by the President, we had already disbursed $12 million. When this pandemic hit our shores, we knew we had to act fast. The Ministry of Health requested for resources, and Finance approved, and we disbursed $4 million to as a start-off expenditure. Then a week after, they requested for more money, and we disbursed $8 million. So that's how the $12 million, that was there before the 500 million. But let me go back. What happened when this outbreak, the coronavirus, was announced, and it started unraveling itself in China, and as it now transcends to the rest of the world, we knew the way this thing was moving, we better be prepared for it. We started at the Ministry of Finance, we went to work. First, what we did is to assess the impact of COVID on the Gambian economy. Because, I mean, an outbreak like this, if it is coming towards your country, you need to be prepared. And to be prepared and to respond to it appropriately and adequately, you need to know what it will take. So we had to kind of make an assessment, to have a preliminary assessment to quantify the quantum of resources that will be needed for the country to fight against the COVID. That is to prevent, contain, and eventually, if anybody is unfortunate to be hit by the virus, then we can cure. So whilst when we did that preliminary assessment, I think less than 2-3 days, the National Assembly called the Minister of Finance to the Assembly to go and give an assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on the Gambian economy. We went there, and the minister read his statement. At that point, some National Assembly members asked him how much money would the government throw at this problem. And then he said, any amount it takes. When we came back, we went to work. And then we collaborated with the Ministry of Health, and then asked them what their needs are. And then they sent in a request for resources, both domestic resources and what they would need also from donor partners, World Bank in particular. So when they brought in their request for resources, my team and I, we sat down and looked at it, and we said, well, let's call them to a meeting again. We called the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Health, the Director of Health came and sat with us in our conference room, and we looked at their request list. And then from there, that kind of gave us a very good indication of how we need to work around things to come out with a ballpark figure of what the state can afford to meet the requirements of the health ministry to be prepared to confront this COVID-19 pandemic. At that point, after our meeting with them, we also invited some experienced Gambian doctors who had worked in the international scene and are retired resident back in the country. We engaged them to further assess what we need, our level of preparedness in terms of health facilities, equipment, medical supplies, all those things. And then including at that meeting, some private Gambian doctors, private practitioners, doctors. After having discussion with those people also, then we sat down and put things together, look at the budget, and then that's how this $500 million was put together. And His Excellency, the President, approved it, and I went to announce to the Gambian people that $500 million is available to the Ministry of Health to fight this pandemic.
Within a short period, how did 143 million just go like that?
Okay.
Can you explain that?
Now, before I get to that, after we got this 500 million together to spend government resources, it has to follow a process. And the process has to be very transparent, because at the end of the day, there will be accountability. I mean, we have to come back to the Gambian people. We have to go to the Gambian People's Assembly to tell them how these resources were spent and the impact of this expenditure on the economy and also the health sector. Let's remember one thing. This coronavirus pandemic is a threat to the country on two fronts. It's a threat in terms of lives and livelihoods. Lives is our survival, the health, our existence as human beings, as a country, because you have to have people before you have a country. And we've seen how dangerous these diseases, aside from the health part, it impacts livelihoods also, our way of life, our survival, the economy. So these $500 million is what we did is the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Health, the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Samate, and the Honorable Minister of Finance, Minister Njai, came together and said to PS Jaite, that is the PS for Health, and my humble self, for us to form a team, a committee, that will now administer the way this 500 million is going to be spent. For two reasons. One, to ensure that there is transparency, and two, that we live, it's a period of emergency. And it doesn't, in an emergency, you don't have the luxury of time to go through the bureaucratic red tapes. Because the way you spend government money, if health now requests for money, it has to come to finance. It goes through our mail folder, it comes to my desk, I look at it, and then I minute it to my budget director. After the approval process, it goes to budget and accountant general, and then it's finally paid, the exit point. Even before it exits, it reaches that exit point. If it is to procure, let's say, health equipment, there are rules. The GPPA rules will now come into play. It has to go to that office. So in order to cut all that process, because we are dealing with a very deadly disease, there is no time. That committee, again, we brought in it. The Director General of GPPA, Mr. Tembelu, sits on that committee. The Internal Audit Director General sits on that committee. The Accountant General is there. The Director of Health is there. The Deputy Permanent Secretary Health is there. My technicians are part of it. PS Jaite's technician also sits on that committee. The way it goes, now the way we spend this money is, if there is a request from health that they need to either purchase something or they need to pay for the hotel expenses of people who are quarantined, their food, any need that is there to confront this monster, the coronavirus pandemic, they would send that request. When it comes to health, they send it to this committee. It's called the procurement committee. When it comes, we sit down, look at it, whether it's genuine, and all other protocols surrounding that particular issue will be observed, and then we look at the authenticity After that, we make a decision to approve or not to approve. There are instances when we rejected certain requests. Coming to the point, between when the fund was set up to the point that you referred to, how come that much money is spent? This is not a kid's play. This is something that is threatening our existence. We've seen what happened in China, what happened in Italy, France, and then the United States recently. It is how much, how urgent and how quickly you respond to this disease as it enters your territory. That is important on your ability to control this and contain it. If you relax, it goes with full force and then you cannot contain it. So what we did, and like I said, in Italy and other places where it overwhelmed them, they have to decide who to let go and who to save. And if you are an elderly person, they will let you go and save the young one. We don't want to get to that stage. So these expenditures have to be quick. But coming back to that point, these expenditures were looked at by our committee, and they are mainly on training, travel expenses, hotel accommodation for quarantine people, food for quarantine people, hospital equipment, supplies, sanitary supplies, allowances for frontline health workers. That's how, and then what, if in fact, if you hear or heard about 143 million, you are like, wow, how come within a short period? Just like you said. Yes, it's possible. The 100 million is something that the Ministry of Finance has released. And before, let me go back a little bit. The $500 million is when Finance approved it, when the resource was put together and then put in that budget line item. For the first thing we did, the first 12 million, we allocated that to the accountant of the Ministry of Health. So their account unit is responsible for spending that money. The $500 million is, when it was made available, is for health. But what we did to make it transparent, we created a project account, and it sits on the IFMI system, separate from the Ministry of Health's budget and their account units operation and control. So this one is independent. It's a project account, COVID-19 funds, on the IFMI system of the Accountant General, visible to everybody. At the click of a button, you can see how it is being moved and the balance at the end of the day. And the 12 million we disbursed earlier on, by the time we sat with them to say how much of that you've spent, I believe, if my memory served me right, it was 1.7. So we said, the committee, the procurement committee, we said, now move the rest of the money to this COVID project fund. So the 12 million was moved to the 500 million, it becomes 512 million. Now when we meet as a committee, that's where we spend from. And then I told the Accountant General, because it's a directorate under Ministry of Finance, I told the Accountant General, I want you to give us, this committee, a qualified accountant who would now come sit at the Ministry of Health and would be in charge of the expenditures of this account. So the 143 million now goes like this. The story is like this. The $100 million is that you are hearing about is monies that was released from the Ministry of Finance, but is not at the exit door yet. This is $2 million that the Ministry of Health requested from the committee and to spend out of these $500 million to procure equipments, medical supply, ventilators from the Republic of Turkey. And the reason is this. The World Bank, when this COVID-19 manifested itself on the shores of the Gambia, that very week, we consulted the World Bank, donor partners. The World Bank responded first. I'll never forget this. It was on a Friday. We left our office around 3:30. Actually, the appointment time is 3:30 to be at the World Bank office, the local office here at Cape Point. We went there. I'll come back to the 143. I'm trying to give you bits and pieces, and the whole puzzle will be solved very soon.
Don't worry, Gambians have time when it comes to money.
Yes.
So.
We went to the World Bank office, and the World Bank staff were there. We were there up to 9 o'clock. My staff, myself, PS2 Finance, the Permanent Secretary Health, Director of Health, and their technical team, myself, my PS2, and the technical team, and the World Bank team, we sat down to work out based on the list of the health ministry, their requirements. And then we had a video conference with the World Bank team in the Gambia, Dakar office, and the Washington office to try to ask for assistance from them, how much they can give us upfront. So we worked around things and came up to $10 million. But the $10 million, like my minister explained at the National Assembly, what the World Bank could offer instantaneously was $5 million. We knew that was not enough because the health ministry came up with something like $8.8 million that they would need to procure equipment from outside, because we all saw what was happening. Borders were being closed, airspaces were being closed, and people's movements were restricted, supply chains were being interrupted. So we knew that we will have to move fast to buy things from abroad before there is a complete shutdown. So this 5 million we knew is not going to be adequate. And then our minister approved, we have a project for state-owned enterprises approved by the World Bank, but the project have not taken off yet in full force. So part of that project money, we took 5 million from there and added to the 5 million that the World Bank already provided and approved to provide. So it became $10 million. And that $10 million, I can tell you a dime of it has not reached the source of the Gambia. We agreed with the World Bank from that meeting, everything looking at the health requirement to fight this pandemic. We agreed. In fact, we itemized it. Everything, how much is going to be spent on each. And then that $10 million World Bank procurement team outside the Gambia, they were responsible. They had this list and they shopped around, and in Turkey, they were able to procure all these items. There are ambulances, medical equipment, ventilators, medical supplies, medication, $10 million. Like I said, the $2 million from the Gambia government's local fund, the $50 million, the health ministry approached the procurement committee and said, the World Bank have procured all these things for us, but the money is not adequate. We need extra medical supplies, equipments, and all other things that they need to equip our health system. They said, let's take advantage of this so that everything is transported together before there is a shutdown. So they said, this $2 million, we are requesting for your approval, that is the committee, so that now we can tell the World Bank procurement team that add $2 million worth of medical equipment and goods. It has not exited. Everything has to arrive here, then we refund them. So their 10 million has all been spent in Turkey. Our 2 million was spent there already. Now because it would have been airlifted to bring everything here. The reason why they are still in Turkey, because some ambulances were involved. Well-equipped medical ambulances. What we have here are transporting patients, but they are not well-equipped. Maybe you have seen that. These are well-equipped, up-to-date ambulances. They needed to be transported together. So what is being negotiated right now is that our president is trying to talk to his counterpart in Turkey through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs so that the president of Turkey can help Gambia for their medical cargo planes to transport these goods to the country. So the 100 million, that's how that was spent. $2 million, $100 million is. As of the date that you are mentioning, the $43 million was spent locally here. So this 100 million is not donor funds. They are not donor funds. These are all Gambia government funds.
Which brings
tax
me
money.
to my next question.
So let me clarify this 43 million. I just spoke about the 100 million. The 43 million also was spent here. And what the 43 million was spent on, like I told you, this is a project account sitting there. It's very transparent. And the committee also are people that are decision makers, very responsible people, all of us. It's permanent secretaries, director generals, accountant general. So it's on the IFMI system. At the click of a button, every day, people are sitting seeing it. The items that they are spent on is what is highlighted here, you know. So it's all allowances, travel expenses, official hotel accommodation for people who have been quarantined, specialized and technical materials, training, food services for people who have been quarantined, vehicles. Also some pickups were bought for the health ministry because not everybody who is suspected of having contacts with somebody who is already infected with this coronavirus, not all of them have been quarantined. Some of them are in the community. So they have to do some contact tracing. Some of them, they were monitoring very closely on daily basis. And these are people that need to move around our communities. They cannot do that without having transport. So pickups were bought also from this money to make it available to health contact tracing teams all over the regions and within the greater Banjul area to move also. So, and then all the regional health directorates within the country, all the regions in the country, they were all given impresses of $100,000 each. That was approved by the committee so that they have it at different regions. Instead of something popping up and then they have to call Banjul, the ministry, to say, we need assistance, we need cars. This thing needs urgent attention. It needs urgent action. So they were all given impresses, 100,000. They have to be accountable for it. They have to retire these impresses at the end of the day. So they have the monies when there are cases in those regions. For instance, in Basse, there were cases. So these people already have 100,000 to immediately go pick those people, provide them with food, those lodges in those areas, they put them there, and monies have to be spent. So those 100,000 impresses were given to them. You add all those things in totality, that's what this 43 million is. So that's how this 143 million was spent. And it was all approved by the committee. Because like I said, at the end of the day, when the dust settles, we have to be accountable. There will be audits. Those audit reports will be published. The FPAC committee of the National Assembly will call the relevant ministries and those involved to come and explain. And again, the Gambian people need to know we will publish, I can assure you this, and announce to the Gambian people that the Minister of Finance will publish all the items, expenditure items for all these monies. We will have it written and put on our website, our Facebook page. We'll even tweet these things. And then we'll let the newspapers, online, print media, and the television, they will have access to all that information, not very far. We are working on it.
Why is it taking him time, and why is it so hard for him to publish the itemized expenditure right now?
It's not hard. It's very simple. And these things are time consuming, and they go through a process. Audits have to be done. The national auditor general is not involved. He sits there, he's not part of it. He sits there, at the end of the day, he does it. But the internal audit, there are internal auditors posted to all these ministries by the Minister of Finance. From the internal audit office. There are processes in terms of government expenditures, government money, the way revenues are raised and spent. There are processes. Things take time. You have to go through those processes. It's an emergency, but at the end of the day, you have to do things right and put it out there. So that's what is going on. And that's how this thing is generated, and we will sit down and publish these things. Right now, everybody is too busy. We are all running around like mad people. You go to work. We stay in our office. Sometimes before I get to my house, it's after midnight. There was a day I got into my house after 1 a.m. And some of these things, before they go out, to make sure that they are accurate and everything is transparently reported, I have to look at it and vet it. Because at the end of the day, whatever happens at that ministry is my responsibility. I joined the ministry from another sector of the government. I'm just about 2 months old. So at the end of the day, whatever is going on is my responsibility. I'm not throwing it at your desk or somebody else's desk or one of my directors. It's me. And for me, I take, like any other Gambian, we all take our jobs very seriously, both in the public sector and in the private sector. So at the end of the day, whatever is going out, especially something as important as like this, I have to sit down and vet it and send it out. And I'm about to do that.
So wouldn't you think that the longer it takes for the itemized expenditure to be released out to the public, don't you think it's going to make people question the transparency and the accountability of this process? What do you think? A lot of people think that it has already been infiltrated. What is your response to that?
But that's why I'm out here talking
to clarify
to the Gambian people. You see, there's one problem. I believe that you have to tell your story. If you don't tell your story, you will tell my story on my behalf, and you will narrate it the way you want it. So it is my obligation to come out and tell my story quickly, and that would save all of us. Because otherwise, if you narrate my story the way you want it, then I will get up to defend myself. So instead of me making news, I become news. I don't want to do that. That's why, like I said, we've been working very, very hard. We are doing a lot of hard work. Everybody that I mentioned who is on that committee, and you've seen the health minister. You are usually at the press conference. When I was coming here, some of your colleagues are there. Everybody is out there trying to fight against this pandemic. This is a monster that is here, is unraveling itself. Even doctors, the characteristic of this thing is all not known. And the way it manifests itself, is not completely comprehended by anybody. This thing is still going out there. And it's true, some people don't believe it. That's the unfortunate part. So whilst you are trying to work on the expenditure front, there's a lot of other things we are doing in the background. Communication, trying to help authorities. It's the same technicians that are trying to do different things, sometimes trying to do 2, 3, 4, 5 things at the same time. I'm a trained economist. I have nothing to do with health, but some of my engagements cut across different sectors. And that is not, that doesn't mean that my daily core routine functions, I have to do them. This is the Ministry of Finance. It's the most important ministry, in my opinion, the busiest in this country, because all sectors of the government, whether it's ministry, department, agencies, even government parastatals or state-owned enterprises, all of them, their lifeline is this ministry. We dish out the resources. The resources that the GRA revenue that is corrected, on behalf of the Gambian people, and the budget that was approved by the National Assembly based on those resources and the donor inflows, loans and grants, we now spend. And the accounting officer is my humble self. It's the same person doing everything, you know. So it's not an easy task.
Honorable Seri,
you can understand why we are all working overtime, just to make sure that the Gambian people, first of all, are safe and their resources are spent transparently. That's why we did not leave it in the hands of one person. Like I said, we could have moved these funds to health and we go to sleep. But now it's not armchair, like I said, it's not armchair financing. When we put money out there as Minister of Finance, we will follow the money. It's not only this COVID fund. Any money now we put out there, we'll follow it. We will monitor how it is spent. Even funds that are given to ministries and departments to go and spend, there is aid coordination. They will be out there monitoring. At the end of the day, it is us that they call to the National Assembly. It is us now. You are asking me, why are you not publishing this? So if I sit down and don't perform my duty and say my responsibility is gather the resources together and then approve, and the budget directorate, the director has sent, allocate this, he sends it out, the accountant general loads that particular budget expenditure item, and then we go to sleep. That's not how it should be.
Now let's talk about the loans, the grants, and all the other funds that are associated with the in response to fighting this coronavirus. Yes. Government has also received $1 billion from the International Monetary Funds in complementing the COVID-19 containment measures. Mm-hmm. If I may ask, what percentage of that fund is a loan? And what is the grace period, and when is the maturity date?
That loan, all of it, that money, all of it is a loan. And that loan, the repayment period for RCF is usually 5.5 to 10 years. You see, the IMF, as a member, IMF is like a cooperative union. Like locally we say Osusu. Mm-hmm. You see, the IMF, right after the Second World War, the international community decided to come together. But it was first started by then the big powers, US and UK in particular. You have a very renowned economist, John Maynard Keynes. Most economists, almost every economist, if you are a student of economics and become an economist, you must know Keynes and you must know Keynesian economists. John Maynard Keynes of the UK and Harry Dester White of the US came together with their team to form the International Monetary Fund, so that the international monetary system, payment system, works in a coordinated way. And then countries started joining. That's why you have countries' membership to the fund at different periods. Now what happens is when you join the fund, you pay some money to join. That's your capital, you invest. And in the fund, they call it quota. So that's your quota, that's your capital there. Now when there are issues that countries have, mainly developing countries, you always hear Gambia has an IMF program, because the way it works, when even without a program, all members of the IMF, annually, the IMF would assist their economists. I'm sorry, I'll take you back, but I'm trying to get to this $1 billion. The IMF would assess your economy, you know, whether you are a program country or not a program country. The annual assessment, even America, UK, Germany, France, Italy, the big players there, China, you know, they have annual assessments. Article 4 consultation, they call it. Every country, they have to assess your economy to know how it is been functioning. What are the successes, what are the problems, what needs to be done. And then after that assessment, it goes to the executive board of the IMF, and then they will look at it and then provide comments, recommendations to that country, what needs to be done. Where they are doing fine, they compliment them. Where they need adjustment, they would recommend to them. It's left to the country to take honor. That's part of the benefits of being a member of the IMF. For developing countries like the Gambia and many developing nations, when you have economic troubles, the IMF works with you and you get into a program with them. When, I'll just take it from the recent period, after regime change, what we had with the IMF was a staff monitor program. That's usually for 6 months. Ours went a little longer than that. And then we graduated into an ECF program, that is Extended Credit Facility. This is a program where there are resources attached to it. They give you sort of it's still a loan, but soft loan, interest-free, long extended period. But that one is for balance of payment support. What that means is that that money goes to your central bank, is a loan to the central bank, not government, and the central bank use that money to augment their reserves. If I want to go through the explanation
There's
of
too much
balance,
technicality in it. Yeah.
Now the RCF, which is Rapid Credit Facility, for situations like this, the IMF would assess the country's need and then go to the executive board, request for approval, they would approve it. They approved 21.3 million or 21.1. But that translates to $1 billion, $1.1 billion approximately. Now that $1.1 billion is a loan to the Gambia, interest-free, like I said, for an extended period of time, but not more than 10 years. And that $1.1 billion is here, is sitting in the central bank, but is a loan to the central bank. The IMF, like I said, they don't give loans to governments. They give loan to the central bank. Now the central bank, this one is meant to support the country to deal with this COVID-19 pandemic. Now the central bank now on-lends that to the government in local currency, so it's a local currency loan. It's between the government of the Gambia and the central bank. And a memorandum of understanding has been signed by the Minister of Finance and the governor of the central bank. And the monies are now in the accounts of the central government in the Consolidated Revenue Fund. The reason why we cannot spend that, this money is outside the approved budget. So we have to go to Parliament and request for supplementary appropriation. And then when they approve, the money now can go into the budget and we spend. That's how it goes.
Aside
so
from
everything is very
the $500
clean.
million, the $500 million is the $1.1 billion is. How much money has government collected from partners so far? I'm talking about money, of course, that are not loans and are specifically meant to support the populace.
The monies, we are working hard, like any other developing country, talking to our donors, both traditional and non-traditional donors. Like the monies that I've explained is Gambia government money, World Bank money, IMF. We are talking to the African Development Bank. Before I left my office, in fact, I came out of that meeting. We had a video conference with the African Development Bank to try to get resources from there. We had similar video conferences with the Islamic Development Bank. Badia, we are discussing with them. Different donor agencies. All we are trying to get resources, grants, soft loans, so that we can deal with this problem. But as I am talking to you here, the resources that reach our source here is this IMF $1.1 billion. The World Bank money was all spent outside. The 10 million was all spent outside. So none of that money reached our source. We are talking to other in-country donors, working with them so that they can also assist. For instance, the UNDP is working with GBOS. They've conducted a survey of the tourism industry to see those that are affected, how they can help them in terms of cash transfer. You know, other agencies, I understand, even the World Bank is thinking along those lines, so that as this thing stays with us, the longer it stays with us, the more it will impact the poor. They want to see how they can also come again to help with cash transfers. But those will be targeted to the poor of country. It has not happened. We are talking. As a government, we know this is a painful thing. People are hurting, businesses are hurting. This pandemic is very mean. People who were not considered vulnerable, businesses that were not considered vulnerable, because of the pandemic, they are now vulnerable. You know why? Because people are not traveling. Borders are closed. The tourism industry is completely closed. All other activities related to tourism, they are all affected. So those businesses around that service sector, they are all now very vulnerable. The entrepreneurs, the small businesses are all very vulnerable because that services sector, tourism, hotels, restaurants, and related activities, they all depend on tourists coming in here. And those tourists that are coming from Europe and the rest of other parts of the world, their ability to come and consume this tourism product here depends on their disposable incomes in those countries. And we all know in those countries, some of them, they are complete lockdowns. Everybody was told to stay indoor. And some of those people depend on jobs that pay hourly jobs, hourly wages. They are in the service sector, they cannot go to work. How are they going to have income to come and spend their leisure time here? What they are thinking of how to survive. So and that's why the tourism sector is locked down. So that vulnerability, like I said, people who are not vulnerable are now vulnerable. I'm not saying they are poor, but they are vulnerable. Their earning capacities have reduced. Their cash flows have been affected, you know. So these are the things, as a government, we are looking at. And as a Minister of Finance, in charge of the economy, these are the things we are looking at and trying to see what are we going to do for our people. For instance, the GRA have announced that any taxpayer who has a problem, whether it's a small business or big business, come and talk to us. We can work with you and do arrange a payment plan where you can pay your taxes without any stress. They've also said that in terms of filing taxes and payment, they've extended the period, I think for about 2 months, without any interest or penalty. And imports that are coming into the country, the CIF value, cost, freight, and insurance, this is what they look at in terms of the quantity of dollars that you've brought into the country in terms of goods, and then they would value and assess the tax on it. That they have even the assessment of those essential commodities, they've reduced by 20%. These are all to help Gambian people and businesses. Yeah.
There is so much that is being done right now to fight the pandemic. But in as much as we are doing so much right now, Gambia also needs to prepare for a post-pandemic recovery. As an economist and a financial expert, what are we looking at here?
You see, the way we are approaching this thing on 3 different levels. First, we have to respond to this corona pandemic and save ourselves. Then we have to restore our economy, our health system. We have to stabilize. But then there's another stage, like you asked. Everything, if we defeat this thing, how do we move on? We have to restart our economy again. So we are approaching it on these 3 levels. And believe you me, at all these levels, we are always trying to be ahead of the curve. For instance, there was a lot of noise before this food support was announced. Everybody was on the radio, the media, people complaining, market women, my neighbors, even myself. Because now we have a situation where, like I said, this affected everybody, and it continues to affect everybody. We are all vulnerable. Our earning capacities are being reduced. And now we say social distancing must be observed. The government went to the National Assembly to ask for state of emergency. Taxi drivers are asked to carry half capacity. All these things means reduction in people's income and cash flow and ability to consume and enjoy what they were, they maintain their way of life. So for us, like I said, as soon as this thing started coming at us, we went to work and we tried to be ahead of the curve. When we walked around the budget and were able to come up with this 500 million, we didn't stop there. We were still working. These folks complain about food. If you are asking me to sit in my house and you've not given me anything, what am I going to do? I'm not going to sit. You are allowing markets to open morning up to maybe 2, you close. At that time, we were working on providing this food support. But I told you, like government is not like even human beings. Certain things, if I want to buy this shirt, I plan for it. I'm not rich. I'm a poor civil servant. I'll save from my money. I travel maybe to a conference. I'm able to save. I buy this shoe. It's not instantaneous. Just like that is at the individual level. Government, that's why we acted. You have to act quickly. So we were working on this food support. Again, we have to see where the money is going to come from. The budget for 500, we had to reallocate the budget. Cut sectors, ministries, department, agencies, from the president right down to the last ministry, everybody's budget was cut massively. 20 million, 50 million, 70 million. That's how we put this thing together. So even for this food support, we went to work like you are asking. We knew we are vulnerable, the impact on the economy, we have to do something. Like what I announced what the government is doing, and we are still continuing to work to see how do we alleviate this pressure on our businesses, on individuals. And that's how we put this food support together, where everything was worked out, quantified, and even before announcing, we even worked out the infrastructure to roll out these food items to the doorstep of the recipients. And we had to quantify. We have like 280,659 households, according to the GBOS statistics, in the whole country. But not everybody needs it. The president doesn't need it. My minister doesn't need it. I don't need it. My director doesn't need it, you know. But there are people who need it. That's God's blessing. It's not by design. We are just blessed by God. So the unfortunate ones need help. Out of these 280,659 households, we now have to sit and now decide who gets it and who doesn't get it, or who needs it, who doesn't need it. That also you have to have a reliable data. This GBOS data, the 280,659 households, that's where it stopped. It's not broken down to that level where we know of those who are the poor household or where are the poor households. Now we have to go and do some statistics sampling, and also even work with the local, the regional governors, the CFOs, the alcalos, the VDCs, to now go down to know households, number of households in villages, each household, how many people. So when you are distributing, it will be fair and evenly distributed. Some villages that have, let's say, 50 households, maybe by the time we reach them, last year it was 50, maybe somebody migrated, it's now 51. Somebody moved from this village to another one, it's now 49. So those are things that you need to figure out to be very good in your estimation. You cannot accurately estimate to the exact decimal point, but you have to be fairly accurate, because you don't want to go and distribute in the village and some have it, some don't have it, and people will take it personally. Because for me, I'll go and ask you as the alkali, why am I singled out? And it's not a good feeling as alkali to answer. And as somebody who is left out, that's not a good feeling. And so we are trying to avoid that. That's why it took time. So that by the time we put it there, we also have a buffer. When there is a shortage somewhere, you quickly take from that buffer and you give it. And we set structures, logistic, communication, grievance address mechanism committee, monitoring committee. All those committees have to be in place to move these things. And then we have to procure these things. The money has to be there. Then you buy now. You know the quantity of what. When the team went to work, like I said, we were not relaxed or sitting and folding our hands. We set a committee at the ministry, and that committee invited other sectors, GBOS, Health, NDMA, National Disaster Management Agency, World Food Program, NANA, people or group government agencies and donor institutions that are in country who have experience in this kind of thing, put heads together and say, work out, this is what we want for the Gambian people. And then they came out with all this number of households. I'm telling you, GBOS said, hey, we have the statistics. Others who have know-how, have experience in distributing food, they know where the poor are, they came with their data. And they came and submitted to me and say, Pierce, here it is, universal, providing for everybody. The 280,659 households would have cost close to $800 million, 799,900 and something. You know, I've been working with, seeing these things for a long time. It sticks in my memory. About $800 million. But we know we shouldn't spend all that 800 because, like I said, you and I don't need it, our households. How do we eliminate people? Sometimes we thought even, okay, let's do it this way. People in Cape Point don't need it. People in Fajara don't need it. People in Pipeline don't need it. People in Burushubi don't need it. Because we know at least the middle class and high income earners are living there. But if we do that, among those areas, there are pockets of poor people. There are pockets of vulnerable people. Yesterday, maybe you don't need it, I don't need it. But maybe today we need it. So we cannot do it that way. Then we said, let's look at income levels. Okay, let's go to Social Security. Let's see, people contribute for pension, provident fund. Their income levels will be known. Anybody who is earning at a certain level and above, and you live in that household, even if you are not head of household, let's eliminate them. No, that also is not fair because the data is not complete. Different scenarios we looked at, and then whilst that is going on, we are collecting data. We are looking at statistical samples. We are doing some sampling until when we came, drill it down to, yeah, we cannot go wrong if we give it out to 84% of households. And that cost us $734 million. Now the money is there. We know who the number of households we are targeting. Now, how do we say this thing? Because my household of 5 people, your household of 10 people, you cannot give us all a bag of rice. So how do we now, the money is there, how many bag of rice? So we now have the experts within these committees, nutritionists who can tell us that somebody needs this amount of maybe kilos of rice per day or grams of rice or whatever measurement they use. I know they use the measurement to get to how we are going to distribute. And that would determine how much rice you are going to have, sugar and oil. And the reason why this rice, sugar and oil finally came to be the foodstuff that we are giving to the people, we had the committee that looked at it, came up with rice, sugar, oil, peanuts, dried milk to distribute, and even cash transfer for every household. Resources are scarce. We already have 512 million there, 730 million. Salaries have to be paid. Government has to function. Essential services have to be run. We have to pay our debts. And resources are scarce. Meanwhile, we are confronted with a situation where our income levels are going down because of reduced economic activity. We all have to stay indoors to save ourselves. Operating hours are cut. Some businesses are almost collapsing. What does that translate to? Less revenue for government. Meanwhile, expenditures are escalating. So that's how we That's the thought and the planning process. And now, after going through all those, that's how we quantified that we need this number of bags, 300,000, or I think it's 230,000 bags of sugar, 230,000 bags of rice. The oil quantity is what I miss now. I'm tired now.
It's a good thing that...
And then the procurement process, like whatever we do, we want it to be transparent, because at the end of the day, we are accountable to the Gambian people. Again, we set a committee. That committee, I chaired it. And in the committee, you have PS Finance, PS Trade, Director General of GPPA, Director General of the Delivery and Strategic Policy Department at the Office of the President. My Deputy Director General is there. The Internal Audit Director General is there. So we sit down and said, how are we going to buy these items? We have options. We go to the direct businessman who imports the distributor and buy it. But we said, $734 million is too much money to be concentrated in few hands. Let's distribute this thing. Businesses, people are hurting, businesses are hurting. And again, we have to patronize our Gambian businesses. This is another opportunity. Whilst you are trying to deal with this virus, you're trying to feed people, but also stimulate the economy also. The opportunity is there. So we decided, let's give 30% of what we are supposed to buy to big businesses. 70%, let's distribute it among small and medium-scale enterprises. How do we do that? If I come, you have it, Mfali have it, gentlemen have it, at the end of the day, I'm in trouble. How did you choose? These are your friends, they are your relatives. What are the criteria? As a government and responsible public servant, that's why I said, let's set up a committee. The committee sat down and said, the Director General of GPPA is there. You can't go wrong with decisions there about procurement. And then we said, let's advertise. We had to do this thing very quick, okay? Because we knew now the money is there, people are hurting, people have cried, and we have to respond as a government. We were working. Now we have results. We have to move fast and give to people. So we said, that very Wednesday, we said, you know what, when we sat down, we decided 30% goes to the distributors. That is easy to deal with. The 70% small and business enterprises, who do you choose? Where are they? We said, we have to advertise. We don't have time. It's an emergency. This is very urgent. It was Wednesday. After closing time, the Director General of GPPA was in his office sitting down, waiting. We are all at different locations. The Permanent Secretary, Trade, is in his office. Myself, I was sitting in my office. Trade, they are the ministry that deals with the private sector, the business people. We said, Trade, now draft the advertisement for people to invite them to tender, send in their bids. The GPPA Director General is there guiding us. And in fact, at some point, I had to go and attend to something. I said, you guys, I'm leaving my office, but I'll be at home. If you are ready, we were communicating. After PS Damfa drafted the letter, sent it to all of us, DG Tembedu was in his office looking at it. I was looking at it. When we agreed on the final draft, DG Tembedu, now Director General, just to show you how seriously we take our work. The Director General of GPPA now became the messenger. He had to run from his office to GRTS because we want so that at the 10 o'clock news, it's announced there. And then the following day, morning, Thursday, it will be in the papers and the radios. And we said Friday, 2 o'clock, that's the cutoff. You send in your bids. 2 o'clock, we all went to Ministry of Trade at their conference room. Those who bidded for this thing and could be there, they were all present. And then we put everything out of the curtain, and then we opened one by one. Staff of the Ministry of Trade, who also there are people who normally works on these bits and all that. They were there announcing openly, this is Business X, offering to supply 20,000 bags of rice, 10,000 bags of sugar, 5,000 20-liter gallon of oil at this price respectively for all three. It's recorded, announced, everybody acknowledged those who bid, all the way to the last one. I believe it was like, there are two numbers, I forgot.
So this was important because some people might think that
just
it
for
was single source,
yes,
when it is actually the opposite. It's not single source.
That's how we did it. And then by 12:30 we sat down to decide what to do. It's Friday, we were all tired, it's Ramadan. We need to sit with cool heads and decide how do we now select. Then on Saturday, we went to the Ministry of Finance. At the Ministry of Finance, our conference room is small. I said, let's go to the Ministry of Agriculture. PS Agriculture is part of this committee. We went to the Ministry of Agriculture. They have a bigger conference room because, again, we have to save ourselves. We are in the front line, but we also want to survive. So we have to observe the social distancing. So we went to that bigger conference room. We sat down, and then the staff from the Ministry of Trade are there with their computers, and DG Tembedu spent more than an hour with them there, trying to go through the same, because I've never done it. I don't know the procurement rules, what needs to be done. I've never sat in bid openings and decided. So he sat down, did everything with that team. They have the experience. We came, we look at it, and then that's where we started the discussion, the criterias, and narrowing down to make decisions. Where we had oversubscription, when we used the price now. Those who bid above the price ceiling that we had, and what we did, the control price announced by His Excellency the President in the Gambia for, let's say, sugar was 1,150, the Banjul price, to the maximum Basse price was the ceiling, this was the floor. Anybody above the ceiling,
then you're out.
You are out. And then we narrow it down. I believe we had like 44 people that we distributed to. Now the other controversy that is out there, let me address that. As far as I know, and this is, in my opinion, the gospel truth, the person who got the contract to supply the items that were at the Makati Square, 10,000 bags of rice, 10,000 bags of sugar, 5,000 gallons of oil. On Wednesday, I told you, was when we sat down to decide that we are going to tender it, give 70% to big players, 30% to big players, 70% to SMEs. We said we wanted the president to come and announce to the Gambian people the food support that he and his government have for the Gambian people on Friday. So Wednesday, 10,000 bags of sugar is not an easy quantity to supply. They have to be moved from the store in trucks to Makati Square, load and offload. So we said that very Wednesday, before the procurement committee for this food support, before we dispersed, we said, now, if we want to announce this one tonight at 10, and tomorrow, Thursday, and close on Friday, this will not be possible. Now let's get somebody to supply this one. That is on Wednesday. We call somebody Thursday and say, can you provide this? The person now uses Thursday and part of Friday to supply that, so that maybe by Friday 4, His Excellency can come and
make the presentation.
Yes. Now, to make that, you have to make that decision before the announcement for SMEs to now bid. So we said, GPPA said to us, maybe a couple of days before that, not more than 2 days, he said to us, some group of women business leaders from GCCI, who are part of GCCI, Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, approached him to say, women seem to be left out. in this government procurement business. We want to be taken care of now, and we have to talk to somebody. So he informed me and some members of the committee. The Director General of National NDMA, Disaster Management Agency, also was approached, he told us, by some women group, the same message. So when they said that, we said as a committee, okay, now why don't we now call one of those women group leaders and say, you supply this one, that is urgent, but you cannot apply in that bid. So that's how that happened. It's not like a single
It was single source to her, because that is the rumor out there.
No,
that okay, it was single source to one person and there was no tendering process.
No, that was not it. It's a committee, and I'm the chair of that committee. Sorry, the procurement committee is the PS Trade, is the chair. The procurement committee for health, the PS Finance and PS Health co-chair that committee. But for the procurement committee for the food items, PS Damfa of Trade chairs that committee. But that's how we decided on that one. It's not like we targeted somebody and single source. Our system, as far as we are dealing with this COVID pandemic, when it comes to government expenditures, as Minister of Finance, we want everything to be transparent because it's our responsibility. And at the end of the day, it is us who are going to be held accountable, me in particular, as the spending officer. I'm the accounting officer for the Minister of Finance, the permanent secretary. So that's why everything we want to be transparent. Anything about this COVID thing is very transparent. Like I said, at the end of the day, we are accountable to the Gambian people, and we will now come to report back to the Gambian people. And that's how we are conducting this business.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sadie. It was good having you here on the News Review today. Thank you very much. Well, that's it for News Review. Do join us tomorrow for another exciting review. And thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.